And welcome back to the Inner Sanctum's YouTube channel, everyone, for another fascinating quad ball video. Today, I'm sitting down with Cameron Walker of the Australian Dropbears, who's currently in Richmond, Virginia, getting ready for the IQA World Cup as part of the squad. How are you, Cameron?
Yeah, great. Thank you. Excited to be here. Just arrived in Richmond last night and we had a pretty cool day today. So yeah, feeling good.
How are the preparations going?
Yeah, good. So we've gotten a little schedule going for the week. We received that a couple of days ago. Basically, we've got we got all our training sessions are generally like a 4 hour time slot. Um, as we found out, it's quite difficult to get everyone to the fields because we need to get a few Ubers and things. But so the 4 hour time slot, and then if you add breaks in because it's pretty hot there, probably like 2.5, 3 hours of like actual full training, but we're still going pretty hard. And in between all that, we've got, like team events like our trivia, we've got team dinners, we're going to like an amusement park tomorrow. And then we've got two scratch matches, um, one against the US Development Academy and one against Hong Kong, which are both happening Wednesday. I think the Development Academy one is being streamed. And then it kind of tapers off on Friday. So once we hit Friday, we're minimal load, but still pretty engaged in the whole process.
The game against the US national development team. What are the thoughts and expectations? Heading into that one, are you thinking that you might get a chance of getting a sneak peek of some of the strategies that the senior team are actually going to develop or actually going to implement? Should you meet them on day two, or is it just get a good scratch match in against a high quality opposition?
Yeah, well, definitely pretty much kind of a mix of both of those. I think my kind of predominant viewing is that it'll be a really great chance to test our team, to test our strategies and our tactics that we've been working on for the past 7 months. But as well, they're a very high quality opposition. We know this. We've seen footage of them playing. And yes, they will give us an insight into the US national team a little bit. They're probably similar kind of play style, maybe not as polished as the experience of the national team, but from the footage I've seen of those players, they're all very high quality and they have amazing coaching resources. So I'm expecting a really big challenge, but I think that's going to be really important for the development of this team leading up to Saturday and Sunday is that we get a bit of that preparation in. We've been really lucky to have members of our own Australian Development Academy playing against us at trainings and competing with us in that environment, and that's been great. And a few of those players are even here. And it'll be interesting to see how other countries' teams react to, our plays, our strategies, our game style, without having known much prior. For instance, if we call a set play in a training, generally the opposition dev team, they know what's coming. So we've had to play with those issues and figure out, how do we get around that? But it would be good to kind of come in and test it against a blind audience. So yeah, I'm really excited for that opportunity.
And then what's the general vibe like amongst the squad leading in now that everyone's arrived?
Yeah, I think everyone's pretty relaxed. So we just came off a team dinner. I think a few people are still back at the arcade right now. Everyone's kind of doing their own thing and chilling out. But when we have our training times, we're all pretty intense and going hard there because that requires our full focus. But yeah, I think especially given that a lot more players have had that national experience, I think there's a little less nerves, and we kind of have a roadmap of how we're going to build into this weekend. So I think everyone's feeling pretty prepared and pretty good. Yeah.
There's a few players still left over from the last time Australia competed at the World Cup in 2018, and there's a big core contingent of this squad that was in Ireland last year for the European Games. What's it like just being able to, I guess, continue that cohesion amongst the squad?
Yeah, so definitely at the start of this year, we kind of cleared the plate and moved on to a new strategy. But we took a lot of the lessons we learned from EG, and I'm sure the older players from previous World Cups have taken lessons they've learned from there and applied them to this campaign. But I think the big message to us from the coaching staff is that it's not EG and it's not World Cup. It's a new tournament and we've got new players, so we're all pretty excited to get stuck into it. Yeah.
So I'm guessing based on like last year's experience, there isn't a lot that's being taken from that.
I think definitely the stuff in terms of like losing that hit us pretty hard, but it was a snitch catch. At the end of the day, things happen. I think the best thing is that we just want to put ourselves in a position where we can take on any team in any scenario and back ourselves to make the right decisions. And if all that happens, I think we can trust the process that we'll get to those important games and play well there. But yeah, definitely the Germany loss was a pretty big lesson for us to not get overconfident, and also I think kind of trusting our teammates a little bit as well. I think that's something that we didn't quite have in that game.
One of the things that the Dropbears started at last year's European Games in the game against Norway was playing with 3 max rule, and the Dropbears are implementing that for the entirety of this World Cup campaign. For those who don't know, in quad ball, it's a mixed gender sport, and the rule book states that a team may not have any more than 4 players of one gender on the pitch at the same time. But the Dropbears are choosing to change that to 3 for this tournament for themselves, and there's a couple of other teams that are doing it. What's it going to be like playing under the 3 max system?
Really, I think no big change for us. All of our players, we trust they can perform the role that's given to them, is that represent Australia at the highest level possible in quad ball. And we've been training in that system. We've been training in those lines of equal gender representation throughout the whole campaign, and we're really prepared for what we're going to come up against. We might come up against 3 max teams. We might come against people playing 4 max. Either way, we're really prepared. We're not so focused on, they've got this player that might be better in that scenario. We're kind of just like, we back our system. And in terms of like the actual makeup of our squad, we've got a really diverse group of players who can play almost any position. And I think that kind of really has benefited the system of implementing 3 max, because it's made those lines and situations where players would play with other players really fluid. Anyone can jump into one spot. So I think that's really benefited the kind of planning of who's going to play with who for this campaign.
And then I guess, how important do you think it is that quad ball, in the future looks to adapt it as, a proper 3 max rule, especially for, representative tournaments that are selection based, where you have the opportunity to make sure that, those selections are adhered to, whereas in clubland, and I'm thinking back to NQL, because like you may not necessarily be able to, just because of the makeup of the team.
Yeah, I think it's really kind of the key thing in quad ball now. It's a bit of a turning point in the game. And all of our players deserve equal representation and equal opportunity to get on pitch. And, everyone here has worked hard to get here. I would hate for other players to feel like they didn't get an opportunity just because, it says in the rules you can play 4 maximum of any gender. So I think it's really important that the countries that are playing 3 max at this tournament, so definitely Norway and Australia, are definitely playing every game with it. I think there's one other team, I can't remember, sorry. But I know there's a few other teams that are doing the kind of conditional thing as well. I don't really like that, but that's their decision. I think it's really important that those countries can go out there and show that these players, predominantly women, can have that opportunity to represent their country. And, it's really supporting the growth of the sport. It'll feed down, if we start doing it at a national level, it'll feed down to the quality in the state and hopefully the club teams as well, where I assume it's gotten its biggest fight back, because I think that some people have found it hard to implement at a club level due to low numbers and things like that, which I can understand, but we kind of have to make a stand and be like, this has to happen now or else it's never going to happen. Like, it's always going to be hard to implement this rule as a change, which will affect rosters and teams and gameplay. But if we can show we can do it at the national level, I'm sure we can implement a system that feeds down the levels to help every team transition to that.
You've got a reasonably tough group. You open up against the Canadians before you play Germany, Japan, and Brazil. It looks like just on the surface that the top of the group is going to come down to that game against Germany. We touched on it last year, the semi-final at the European Games. You also said that, you know, the side has taken the mentality of it's a new tournament, it's not last year, but surely that has to play an impact in how you approach the Germans, right?
Yeah, we've done our research. I definitely have. We know their roster pretty much inside and out, and we've got new plans, new ways to counter their strategies as well. We've watched footage from EQC. A lot of their teams got into quite high positions, and based on their performance last year, we can kind of expect them to play different lines that have different strategies. They had a pretty shot-heavy line, had a very drive-heavy line, things like that. So we can kind of adapt. We also know what's coming this time. I think the big reason that we had that close game against Italy and also how close the Germany game was that they were using strategies that really we don't see in a lot in Australia, like really long passing, shooting from behind at large distances where our defenses weren't quite ready to handle that. Whereas this time we've really worked on specific defenses to counter that. And yeah, I also think that we have a bit more of a structured offense system, which will benefit our success. I think we missed a lot of goals in that game. We let a lot of chances go, which ultimately affected the outcome of the game being in snitch range. Yeah, so I think we're coming in a lot more prepared, and it's going to be a bit more of a new look Australian team. I'm not sure if the Germans have changed as much, but I know they're a very developing nation, and they've put in a lot of effort and resources into building their national team to grow. So I'm really excited for that matchup. Yeah.
I think one of the things that, you know, impacts those strategies from an Australian perspective in terms of long passes and stuff like that is quite honestly the unpredictability of our weather conditions. I think back to national championships last year where the wind just basically made any sort of passing that was longer than a few meters impossible, and that's been an unfortunate factor. You know, just because of the uniqueness of the Australian climate. But transition into looking at the team itself. For those who may be less familiar with quad ball, are there any players that are like on the Dropbears that you think people should be keeping an eye on?
Yeah, so I think if anyone hasn't listened to the Total Quad Ball podcast with Sam Chinden, who's our Australian Dropbears captain, she named a few players there. I'll talk about probably more of the newer players. The newest ones being Nikki Redmond and Olivia Coleman. They only started playing last year. Nikki started start of 2022. Liv started August of 2022. So they're pretty fresh in the scene. And Nikki got to play State Shield last year, and she did quite well there. But no one will really know what those players bring. They both bring incredibly high athleticism and drive and passion to the team, which is really exciting to have that there. So they're definitely two ones to watch out for. Other than that, we've got the EG squad. We'll talk about Simon Spann. He's returning to the team after missing EG. Added a lot of athleticism to the chasing lineup, especially with his sprint coaching, which we've been doing a lot of work on. So all of us are a lot faster now. And as well, his incredible seeking, which is going to definitely come in part. He's probably our primary seeker for the tournament. A few players who've really been looking deadly for the past couple of training camps, Ed Vinay. His driving has been really incredible. His structure in terms of our set plays and things like that, he's really stepped it up, and great to see him performing really well in the lead up to the tournament. Jess Lindley, she was part of the development squad last year and then got promoted to Dropbears for this campaign. She has a rocket arm, playing really smart, making great decisions. Going to be seeing her in ball carrying position and hopefully throwing some shots in, which will probably catch a few people off guard, which I'm really excited for. Um, After that, probably I'll think about a few others. Sorry, probably I'm trying to think of players who weren't quite in that EG squad, so newer to our team. Oh, of course, Ruth Greffield, who's a beater for Queensland, who has made the squad as well. She wasn't involved in the European Games campaign, either in development squad or the actual Dropbears, but she's really come in and hit it hard. Her physicality is excellent, probably one of the best of the beaters in the squad. Um, she's playing really well, especially I like the pairing of her and Nathan Morton, and yeah, it's just another face around. Um, I'm really excited to see her, and again, it's really exciting that Queensland have two female beaters in the squad. Traditionally, they haven't got as many beaters into the national team. I think actually they're the first two beaters who have made the national squad. Correct me if I'm wrong, but yeah, and then I'll also kind of highlight our reserves, our alternates as well, because all of them have been playing extremely well. Nicola Gerlo, head coach of last campaign, is one of the beta reserves. She's been incredibly dedicated to the campaign the whole way through, been really performing well with the squad. And obviously, she brings her game knowledge from last year and previous years as an alternate into that alternate squad. Then we have Ava McConnell, who is an extremely talented wing receiver and chaser for New South Wales and Nightmares. She's playing extremely well. Definitely worked on her physicality, worked on other ways of scoring, playing the ball smart. So hopefully we might see her during the tournament. And then we've got Joe Dodd as well, who's coming in as a chaser reserve. He's playing extremely smart. He's someone who you can give the ball to, and he'll really control the quaffle. And the opposition will not get it. So you know the ball's safe in his hands, and that takes the load off of beaters on offense. And he hits some really good shots as well. And then lastly, Ashana Bay, who is a beater reserve. He's playing incredibly well. He has a lot to contend with, beating against Harry Jones, Luke Derrick, and Nathan, and like competing for that spot. But he holds his own well and truly. He's extremely confident with even just one dodger on defense. Has been making a lot of extremely impactful plays there. So I'm really excited he might feature in one of the tournament games in the weekend. But yeah, I think the quality of those alternates really just reflects upon the depth of the squad in full. And, I think each player's got something to contribute to this tournament. So I'm really excited to see all of them in action.
Yeah, and I just think back to the first two names you mentioned, Nikki Redmond and Liv Coleman. I interviewed a member of last year's squad, Caitlin Taylor, over the weekend. And talked about her making the Dropbears squad, and unfortunately, originally selected for this squad, had to pull out for personal reasons. Yeah. And when she made the national team, she did it before she'd played a competitive NQL, a New South Wales Quad Ball League, for those who don't know, because of the way everything worked out because of the COVID-19 pandemic. And I think with Nikki and Liv, although they have played competitively before making the squad, very similar timelines in just how new they were to the sport when they got selected. And I think that shows a lot about where the development is. Is that something you'd agree with?
Yeah, I think these new players that are coming in, and they're getting a lot of help and resources now. I think there's just a general focus on, we see these athletic players and we can really push them. And that's kind of where the sport's headed under the brand of quad ball. I think that's been really important for our national team, and I really hope, look, there's some really exciting talents that are going to come across in 2023 State Shield, especially from New South Wales Blue Bottles. I really hope that these players continue to receive support from all around. So we've got past players, coaches, everything. And that'll just further push the talent level and talent pool of players in the national setup, which is only going to enhance our effectiveness and capabilities for future World Cups and national tournaments.
And then just one last question to round it off. Obviously, Australia's going to be expecting to top the group on day one. We've already talked about how important the Germany game is going to be to that. What is the goal for day two?
Day two, I think the message is kind of take it game by game. For me personally, I kind of look at England and US as the matchups to win the tournament. If we beat those teams, we can win the tournament. I would also identify Belgium as a really strong contender, given that they won EQC with basically half of their EQC team is the Belgian national team. But given that they have a much harder pool, they could be hindered by that. So I really want the matchup against England. We didn't get to play them at European Games. We actually haven't played them since 2014, apparently. So surely it's time for a rematch. But I think we would match up really well against them because I kind of see a favourable matchup in terms of what they did at EG versus what our current team's strengths are. And then obviously the US are the ones to beat. If you beat them, you win the tournament, basically. That's how I see that matchup. So I'd say day two, if we top the ball play day one, we're probably going to get a team such as Austria or Norway or African nations who will be a solid contender, but hopefully someone that we can beat. And then from there, we can push on to England and the US.
That sounds like a very good strategy indeed. Cameron, thank you so much for joining me today and best of luck for the weekend.
Thanks for letting.